The lobby of the Ocean Crest Haven Hotel, nestled in the picturesque coastal town of Monterey, California, buzzed with life under the warm glow of golden lights reflecting off polished hardwood floors. It was a Friday evening, and every corner of the lobby brimmed with familiar sounds: the hum of weary travelers conversing, the soft chime of the reception desk bell, and the rhythmic rolling of suitcase wheels across the floor. Ocean Crest Haven was far from ordinary. Its splendor seemed plucked straight from a painting. Lush rows of palm trees lined the entrance, leading to a dazzling crystal chandelier commanding attention at the center of the lobby. Behind the reception desk stood Claire, a woman in her mid-30s with her usual air of confidence, though her face betrayed exhaustion from a long, demanding day. From difficult guests to last-minute bookings and irate phone calls about missed reservations, Claire had endured a relentless barrage of stress. Her once crisp uniform now bore the wrinkles of fatigue, an unspoken testament to her weariness. Tonight, Claire was in no mood for any surprises. The lobby doors swung open again, carrying a soft ocean breeze as a man stepped inside. At first glance, he was unremarkable: faded jeans, a worn hoodie, and scuffed sneakers. He carried no luggage, just a weathered leather satchel slung over his shoulder. He paused at the entrance, his calm gaze sweeping across the room as if searching for something. His presence barely registered with others. The guests continued their conversations and the staff maintained their brisk pace. Yet, something about him, the stillness in his posture, the ease with which he seemed detached from the lively hum around him, stood out in a subtle, almost disarming way. Claire noticed him immediately, not because of any overt confidence he exuded, but because his disheveled appearance triggered her instinctive judgment. Her eyes flicked to him briefly as he approached the desk, and she stifled a sigh. Claire's experience told her that last-minute walk-ins often brought trouble. Either they'd haggle over rates or express their frustration over travel mishaps. Judging by his appearance, she was certain which category he fell into. "Good evening," the man said, his voice calm and measured, with an underlying sense of self-assurance. "I'd like to book a room for tonight." Claire forced a tight smile, her expression devoid of warmth. "I'm sorry, but the hotel is fully booked tonight," she replied in a professional yet detached tone. Her fingers danced across the keyboard, feigning a check in the system, though she already knew there were no vacancies. The man didn't react immediately. He tilted his head slightly, his eyes glinting with curiosity, making Claire uneasy. "Are you sure there's nothing available?" he asked, his voice steady, devoid of anger or irritation. "No cancellations or alternatives?" Claire frowned, sensing the onset of a debate. "Yes, sir," she replied, her voice firmer now. "It's been a busy day and all our rooms are fully booked." She gestured toward the bustling lobby to emphasize her point. "There's a motel a few blocks down," she added, deliberately enunciating each word. "They might still have vacancies." He offered a faint smile, one that didn't quite reach his eyes. "No cancellations at all?" he pressed, his tone tinged more with curiosity than insistence. Claire felt a flicker of irritation. "Sir, I don't think this is the right place for you," she said, her voice carrying a hint of derision she didn't bother to hide. "As I mentioned, the motel nearby might be more suitable for your situation." Her gaze flicked briefly to his hoodie and worn sneakers, her meaning unmistakable. The man straightened, his face calm but inscrutable. "Thank you for your time," he said simply, stepping back without argument. But instead of leaving, he took a seat in a corner chair, his line of sight fixed squarely on the reception desk. Claire found it impossible not to glance at him as she continued her work. What was he doing? Why hadn't he left? A strange unease settled over her, but she quickly brushed it off. After all, what could he possibly do? The lobby of Ocean Crest Haven grew quieter as the night deepened, leaving only the soft echoes of footsteps and murmured conversations. From the corner of her eye, Claire spotted the man still sitting quietly in the corner of the room. She told herself there was no reason to feel uneasy, yet her mind couldn't stop conjuring vague, unsettling scenarios. "Are you absolutely sure there are no rooms available?" the man asked, his voice cutting through Claire's thoughts. It was deep and calm, but there was a quiet insistence in his tone that made her uncomfortable. Claire crossed her arms, maintaining an outward appearance of composure. "Sir, as I explained earlier," she said, emphasizing each word, "all of our rooms are fully booked. It's peak season and there's nothing else I can offer." He nodded slowly, as if contemplating something. I see," he replied, his tone devoid of frustration or annoyance. "In that case, if I wanted to book a room for tomorrow night, could you check availability for me?" Claire frowned, surprised by the question. "Tomorrow night?" she repeated, almost as if she hadn't heard him correctly. "Yes," he said, his calm gaze fixed on her. "Are there any rooms available for tomorrow night?" Reluctantly, Claire turned to her keyboard, her fingers tapping quickly across the keys. After a few moments, she looked up, her tone dry and perfunctory. "Yes, we do have availability tomorrow night, but I don't see how that helps you tonight." A faint smile touched his lips, light, almost imperceptible, but filled with a subtle undercurrent of meaning. "No, perhaps it doesn't, but I always like to know my options," he said evenly. Claire's hands clenched at her sides, feeling challenged by his calm demeanor. "Sir, if you don't have a reservation and aren't a good fit for the standards of this hotel, then perhaps you should consider taking your business elsewhere instead of wasting both of our time," she said, her tone colder than she intended, but without regret. The man didn't seem offended. He studied her for a long moment, as if weighing her words, then nodded. "Thank you for your honesty," he said curtly, turning away from the desk. A wave of discomfort washed over Claire as she watched him walk off, but instead of leaving, he returned to his seat in the corner, sitting with a remarkable stillness that made her uneasy. She glanced at him repeatedly, trying to convince herself that he was no longer her concern, yet the strange feeling lingered, as if this man knew something she didn't. As time passed, Claire began to notice peculiarities. The man didn't pull out a phone, didn't read, and didn't interact with anyone. He simply observed every detail, every person in the lobby. Occasionally his gaze drifted toward Claire, but it wasn't judgmental or invasive. It was calm, neutral, as though he were piecing together a puzzle. At one point, Claire saw him assist a young bellhop struggling with an overloaded luggage cart. His gestures were gentle but deliberate, and the bellhop smiled in gratitude. The sight made Claire's discomfort intensify. Who did he think he was? A wandering guest playing the Good Samaritan? Near the end of the night, the man finally stood, slinging his leather satchel over his shoulder. He walked toward the doors but paused before leaving. "Thank you for the hospitality," he said, his deep voice resonating clearly in the now quiet lobby. Claire didn't look up from her computer screen, muttering a distracted, "Good night?" without much thought. But just as he reached the revolving door, he stopped and turned back for one last look. His gaze swept across the lobby, the gleaming floors, the sparkling chandelier, the staff quietly tending to their duties behind the scenes. His eyes settled on Claire one more time. Then, with a faint, knowing smile, he walked out. Claire felt a strange mix of relief and a lingering tension she couldn't quite name. She had no idea that the events of this night were far from over. The following morning, in the grand conference room of Ocean Crest Haven, the staff gathered, the air charged with an unusual tension. Claire sat in the back row, her eyes heavy with fatigue after a late-night shift. Meetings like these were usually unremarkable, routine announcements about minor procedural changes or reminders about customer service. She wasn't expecting anything extraordinary. But today felt different. Claire noticed even the senior managers appeared restless. Whispered rumors buzzed across the room like a flickering flame, and the anticipation of an important announcement gripped everyone. The door swung open, and the room immediately fell silent. Mr. Henry, the hotel's general manager, entered with his usual confident stride. However, walking behind him was a man who made Claire's heart sink. It was the same man she had curtly dismissed the night before, the one she had silently judged with more than a hint of disdain. This time, however, he wasn't wearing a faded hoodie or worn jeans. Instead, he was clad in a perfectly tailored black suit that accentuated his commanding presence and quiet confidence. Claire felt her knees weaken. She wanted to disappear, to flee the room, but it was too late. "Allow me to introduce Mr. Elon Musk," Mr. Henry announced, his voice resonating throughout the room. "The new owner of Ocean Crest Haven." The room plunged into stunned silence. All eyes turned toward the man being introduced, their expressions a mix of shock and awe. A faint smile graced Elon's face. The same smile Claire had once interpreted as smug, now exuded undeniable authority and self-assurance. "Good morning, everyone," Elon began, his voice warm yet assertive. He stepped forward, his gaze sweeping over the room. "I'm thrilled to be here today as part of this incredible team." Claire's heartbeat thundered in her chest, her fingers gripping the arms of her chair tightly. Every word she had spoken to him the previous night replayed vividly in her mind. Every judgmental glance, every dismissive tone. Now all she wanted was to vanish. Elon continued, his voice steady and precise, each word landing with weight. "I've always believed that to truly understand how a business operates, you need to see it through the eyes of everyday customers. That's why, last night, I chose to visit without prior notice, to observe how this hotel functions in its day-to-day operations." Murmurs rippled across the room, and nervous glances were exchanged among the staff. Claire kept her head bowed, desperate to avoid anyone's gaze. "I witnessed many positive things," Elon went on, a faint smile playing at the corners of his lips. "From the seamless coordination of the bellhop team to the professionalism displayed by the front desk staff in handling challenging situations, truly, you've made me feel proud." Claire silently prayed that the speech would end there, but it didn't. Elon paused, taking a deep breath, his sharp eyes scanning the room. "However, I also observed something crucial. Not everyone fully understands the value of patience and kindness, especially in the hospitality industry. Sometimes a simple smile or a gentle word can make the difference between an exceptional experience and a disappointing one." His gaze settled on Claire. Though he didn't call her out by name, she knew without a doubt that she was the person he was referring to. Her stomach churned and her face burned with embarrassment. Elon's tone remained calm, devoid of judgment or anger, yet the gravity of his words felt almost unbearable. "This is not about criticism," Elon said, his voice softening. "This is a reminder that each of us has the opportunity to improve, to become the best version of ourselves. I believe that with effort and dedication, this team can become one of the finest in the industry." His words hung in the air, carrying both weight and inspiration. Claire sat frozen in her chair, overwhelmed by the impact of what had just transpired. The staff in the conference room of Ocean Crest Haven began murmuring among themselves after Elon concluded his speech. Nods of agreement spread across the rows of chairs, but Claire remained motionless, her hands clenched tightly on her lap. Her mind swirled with memories from the night before. The calm gaze of Elon, her own sarcastic tone, and the unmistakable disdain in her every gesture. Her face burned with shame. Every word, every action replayed in her mind, stark and vivid like ink on a blank page. It could all have been avoided, but it wasn't. Elon continued, his voice steady and commanding. "Starting today, I will work closely with management to ensure that our team has everything it needs to succeed. From advanced training and necessary support to clear accountability, we owe it to ourselves and to our guests to set the highest standards in the hospitality industry." Polite applause rippled through the room, but Claire couldn't bring herself to join. Her mind felt constricted by the weight of her conflicting emotions. As others began filing out of the room, murmuring about what had just transpired, Claire remained rooted to her seat, feeling as if her feet had been nailed to the floor. She stole a glance upward, just in time to see Elon stepping down from the podium, the faint smile still lingering on his face. He didn't glance her way again, but his presence alone was enough to force her into a state of self-reflection. Claire knew that the previous night she had made a monumental mistake. Not just as a front desk receptionist, but as a person. As she tried to summon the courage to stand, a figure appeared beside her. Claire looked up, and her heart seemed to stop. Elon stood there, his calm and authoritative demeanor only heightening her unease. "Claire, right?" he asked, his voice low and measured, carrying a sharpness that cut through her disarrayed thoughts. She swallowed hard, her throat dry as sand. "Yes, sir," she replied, her voice so faint that even she could barely hear it. Elon studied her for a moment, his eyes seeming to penetrate the tangled mess of thoughts in her head. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled, a genuine, almost reassuring smile. "I know working the front desk isn't always easy, especially on busy days," he began, his tone devoid of any trace of reproach. "But Claire, remember this. Every interaction we have with our guests matters. They can feel how we treat them, even if we think it's just a fleeting moment." Claire nodded quickly, her gaze still fixed on her tightly clasped hands. "I understand, and I'm so sorry if I—" Elon raised a hand, cutting her off gently but firmly. "There's no need to apologize. What's more important is that you learn from it and grow. That's what truly matters." His words silenced her, leaving her with a mix of relief and heaviness in her chest. Elon gave a small nod, signaling the end of their conversation, then turned and walked away. Claire remained seated, her heart pounding in her chest. Elon's words echoed in her mind, looping like a song she couldn't turn off. For the first time in her career, she truly understood the weight of her every action and word, how much she had overlooked their significance. The meeting, the shocking revelation about Elon, and his profound reminder left an indelible mark on her. As Claire finally stood and exited the conference room, she carried with her not just a lingering sense of embarrassment, but also a newfound determination. "Be better," she silently vowed as she stepped through the lobby doors. "Not just for the guests, but for myself." In the weeks that followed, Claire began to change the way she worked. She listened to her guests more attentively, greeting them with genuine smiles instead of the weariness she used to carry. She learned to be more patient, placing herself in their shoes and focusing on finding solutions rather than creating barriers. When customers responded with satisfied looks and warm smiles, Claire knew she was on the right track. Her colleagues noticed the change in her as well, and gradually, the working environment at Ocean Crest Haven became more pleasant. For Claire, this was more than just a shift in her work habits. It was growth within herself. The story of the mysterious owner quickly became a quiet legend among the staff at Ocean Crest Haven. No one knew when Elon Musk might return, but the possibility served as a constant reminder for everyone to remain dedicated and professional in their roles. For Claire, that encounter wasn't just a lesson. It was a turning point in how she viewed her responsibilities. What was once just a temporary job, a means to get by, had transformed into something much more meaningful. No longer did she see her shifts as long and exhausting hours. Instead, she saw an opportunity to make small but meaningful changes in the lives of those she interacted with. The lesson Claire learned that day was simple yet profound. Never underestimate the power of kindness, and never judge someone by their appearance. She came to understand that every word, every action could create a ripple effect, touching lives in ways she couldn't foresee. Claire's transformation didn't happen overnight, but little by little, she became someone even she hadn't expected. Each day, she set small goals, helping one more guest, showing patience during a difficult interaction, or simply offering someone a sincere smile. Gradually, she began to feel the difference. Her colleagues noticed the change too. Claire was no longer the frustrated receptionist who snapped under pressure. She became the person others turned to for help, not just because of her dedication, but because of the warmth she conveyed through her actions. Elon's story became a quiet symbol within the hotel, a reminder that you never truly know who you're dealing with or the impact your actions might have. As Claire continued to grow in her role, the message from that story became ever clearer. Kindness costs nothing, but the rewards it brings can change lives. If this story has touched your heart, we'd love for you to share its message by liking and sharing it with your friends, helping us reach our first milestone of 1,000 subscribers, which means the world to us and allows us to create more meaningful stories for you. Don't forget to share your thoughts about the story and let us know which city you're watching from. Thank you for your support, and we'll see you in our next story.